is a 24-inch M1 iMac, which I've been using for the past 2 months. And yes, I have somehow managed to keep this a secret, but that aside, this will be a full review of this iMac and a full deep dive into everything you need to know about this. So to start off, I ordered this on the 27th of June and it took about a month to come, and it arrived at my home on the 31st of July. The model I have here is the one with 16GB of RAM, the M1 with the 8-core GPU, and a magic trackpad, magic mouse, and magic keyboard. So this is basically maxed out apart from the storage. I've kept the storage to 256GB, and I'll talk about why in just a little bit. And before we talk about the M1 chip and the power it brings to the table, we need to address the first thing we see when we look at this: the design. The design of this iMac is overall a throwback to the iMac G3, or the first iMac. From the color scheme down to the way it was advertised, it is very similar to the original iMac. I do quite like this retro-futuristic direction that Apple is heading towards. And when I first turned the iMac on, I realized that this is very reminiscent to the Pro Display XDR. From the stand to the bezel thickness, yeah, it is very similar. It does have wide bezels and a chin though, which is slightly different, but it is quite impressive for the fraction of the Pro Display XDR's price. If you're a viewer of the channel, you know that I have the blue iPad Air, and so I had to go with the blue iMac. The blue on this iMac looks absolutely stunning. It has a blue color stand which is very similar to the color on the AirPods Max and the iPad Air, and the color on the back is very similar to the one on the Apple Watch Series 6 and the iPhone 12. The one on the front on the chin I think is similar to the Sierra Blue on the iPhone 13 Pro and Pro Max. The Apple logo on the back is made out of some plastic material, and it also acts as an antenna, and this time there is no Apple logo on the front. The friendly design of this iMac with the wide bezels and the colors essentially lets you place this iMac anywhere you want. Let it be a kitchen, office workspace, or just your room. It's going to look stunning. We also do have a chin on this iMac, which doesn't bother me personally, and it never has on my old iMac, but thanks to this chin, we do get to see an incredibly thin iMac. This iMac is just 11.5mm thin, thinner than most monitors, but this thinness means that the headphone jack now has to be on the side, and on the side it makes it more accessible, but if you think about it, it now has to protrude from the side and it looks quite ugly, and it also has chances of breaking into two if something goes wrong. This iMac weighs about 4 kilograms, slightly lighter than the old iMac which was around 5 kilograms. You might have heard many reviewers say that this is incredibly light, but well, it's not really light because they're comparing it to the Pro Display XDRs and the 27-inch iMacs, which are very heavy. But on the other hand, this is what you'd expect from a 24-inch all-in-one. But all of this isn't to say that there is a significant reduction in volume, and this volume reduction leads to taking up to 5 centimeters less desk space than the older iMac, which is quite nice. So this iMac has 4 USB-C ports. 2 of them are Thunderbolt 4 and the other 2 are USB 4. I haven't had too many issues so far since most of my stuff is USB-C, and you might have to think about if you need a dongle or not. I thought I would need one, but I haven't found the need to connect one so far. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, I would appreciate you clicking that like button, and while you're down there, do click the subscribe button as well. So this incredibly thin design that we just talked about is only possible thanks to Apple's M1 chip. And the M1 chip, as I've already placed in my M1 MacBook Pro and M1 MacBook Air video, is incredibly power efficient and incredibly powerful at the same time. This iMac never gets hot and the fans never need to turn on. And the maximum I've seen this hit is 70 degrees Celsius, and that was only once, only because I was editing 8 streams of 4K, which is a lot. And when I usually check the temperatures, they're around 36 degrees Celsius, which is impressively cold. And whenever you touch the iMac chassis, it is usually cold to the touch, which is impressive. Ever since this iMac arrived, I've been attending meetings, watching and editing videos here and there. Even my last video was edited on this iMac. Then I've also been making presentations, making spreadsheets, documents, everything what you'd expect a normal consumer to do and more. And as an upgrade from the 21.5-inch iMac, this computer has changed my life. This iMac takes about 11 seconds to boot up even on macOS Monterey. Apps open instantly just like on iOS and iPadOS. The UI is always at 60 FPS. Everything feels fast, smooth and stable. Let's go over benchmarks for a minute if you're interested. The single core score is the highest we have ever seen so far at 1711 points, which means that all the day-to-day tasks are going to be incredibly smooth on this. The multi-core score is about 7442, which is higher than the 16-inch MacBook Pro and the older Mac Pro, both of which cost way more than this iMac. On Apple's Speedometer 2.0 benchmark, we get an incredibly high score of 253. There is no way you will face any issues with web browsing on this computer. And also that is probably one of the highest speedometer scores you can find. And all the Google websites from Google Docs, Google Jamboard and Google Meet, which always require up to 100 gigabytes of RAM, run very smoothly on here. The 1080p camera, which you're looking at right now, along with the M1's ISP, makes the lighting good, even when there's no additional lighting. The iMac's microphones, which you're listening to right now, sound great. They block background noise and sound great overall, thanks to the microphones being placed almost everywhere on this iMac. And here's a quick look at the Apple Silicon exclusive portrait mode video for video conferencing coming with macOS Monterey in the upcoming months. I think it does a pretty nice job, although I would like an option to keep a slightly lighter bokeh. And here's how it looks with some additional lighting. Although it looks a lot better, most people won't have such lighting, and for the few who do, here's how it looks. That's all the basic tasks we went over just now, but coming to more intensive things like video editing, my last video was edited on this iMac and it was very smooth. Gone are the days where I had to wait for 2 hours for the files to render and to let them take about 200 gigabytes of space. Now it just doesn't need to render. It's ready to edit as soon as you drag the clips into the timeline. And the video you're watching right now was also edited on this Mac. And the intro of this video had about 8 streams of 4K laid on top of each other, which did manage to slow down this iMac, like I said earlier, but rendering took about 2 seconds and then it was smooth once again. And if I'm just using 1 to 2 streams of 4K, I don't even need to render it. It's just ready to edit. The variant I have here is with 16 gigabytes of RAM, but honestly, I think it would be a very similar experience with the 8 gigabyte RAM model, because I just went for a 16 gigabyte model so that I could use it for a good 6 years. And if you're planning to use it for about 3 to 4 years, I think 8 gigabytes is fine for you. Anything more than that, I think 16 gigabytes should be the way to go. It has been over a year since Apple announced the transition to Apple Silicon Macs, and most developers have now optimized their apps for M1 and they run natively. Apps like Arduino and OBS, which I also like to use, haven't been optimized for M1 natively yet, but Rosetta does an excellent job at it and they run flawlessly. If you're worried about apps not working, you might be surprised by how good Rosetta is and by the number of M1 native apps that are already on the App Store and elsewhere. Also, do check this website out. It lets you know which apps support Apple Silicon and which ones are running fine with Rosetta. It'll be a really good utility and resource for you to decide if M1 is right for you. With the influx of Windows users coming over to macOS, I think developers who have avoided macOS for a while now will consider developing for it, and the future does seem pretty bright for Apple Silicon. And if you have any Windows apps that you want to use on Apple Silicon or macOS in general, then apps like Parallels and Crossover let you do just that. And thanks to M1 being based on ARM, the same architecture as iPhones and iPads, you can now run selected iOS and iPadOS apps on your Mac. So this iMac comes with a 24-inch display. It is actually 23.5 inches rounded off, but regardless of that, it is slightly but noticeably larger than the 21.5-inch iMac. And most people are calling this as a smaller display, but I really don't get why, because 21.5 inch was already massive for me. And if you really feel the need for more window space, then just rescale the display to the minimum and it will effectively give you the same window space as a 27-inch iMac. The 4.5K display is extremely color accurate, looks stunning, has the P3 wide color gamut, and gets extremely bright if you want it to, but I usually like to keep it at about 45% brightness. The display is mainly what you're paying for. About 60 to 80,000 Indian rupees of this iMac's price is basically the display for sure. And also the thin bezels make this a very immersive experience. The speakers are much better than the already impressive 21.5-inch iMac speakers, and thanks to the 6 speakers and the impressive audio engineering, this packs in a good deal of bass even with this thin design. The vocals are extremely clear, and somehow this iMac manages to generate a 360-degree sound space with Dolby Atmos. You have to hear it to believe it. Since this iMac also supports, this means that it can also be used as an HomePod, to be honest. And here is how these speakers sound. This will give you an idea of how good they are. Talking about accessories, out of the box, you'll get a Magic Keyboard with or without Touch ID based on what configuration you choose, and you'll get either or both the Magic Trackpad and Magic Mouse. I've opted for all 3. And talking about what comes inside the box, I will also shortly be uploading the unboxing of this iMac, so if you're interested, do hit that bell icon to get notified whenever that video comes out. The trackpad is awesome, and I've always loved the Magic Mouse, and the keyboard has the same great experience from the Magic Keyboard too. And also the addition of Touch ID to the keyboard is much appreciated. This is probably one of the first desktops to get Touch ID or fingerprint scanning. I also compared the speeds of Touch ID unlocking to the M1 MacBook Pro and M1 MacBook Air off camera. And yeah, the M1 MacBook Pro and M1 MacBook Air are slightly faster, but only by half a second. Basically because here you have to transfer it via Bluetooth, and there it's a wired connection. So yeah, I just wanted to let you know that there is a slight delay. Also, everything from the keyboard, mouse, trackpad, lightning cable, power cable to the Apple stickers are color coordinated. And talking about the power cable, the higher end Macs get 10 gigabit Ethernet on the power brick, which is neat for the ones who need it. The trackpad has all the amazing macOS gestures, and it is a joy to use. I love it. Although if you were to choose one, then I'd recommend the Magic Mouse if you do video editing or anything that involves precision clicks, and the Magic Trackpad if you do a lot of web browsing and also need a wider range of gestures. Alright, talking about price, this iMac costed 1,72,900 Indian rupees or $2,350 in the US. I also didn't go for higher storage variants for a few reasons, and let me explain why. Apple's SSDs are very expensive, and I can get a 2TB Samsung T7 SSD for the same price as Apple's 256GB. I'd recommend going for the 2TB Samsung T7 SSD instead. And since Final Cut Pro doesn't have to render all the files to edit, I'm not going to run out of storage often, so that is going to help a lot. You can get the iMac right now, but the shipping prices are a bit high, just as they were when I bought it about 3 months ago. Looks like the chip shortage is still impacting the iMac supply, which is kind of sad. Alright, so coming to the overall summary and the end of this video, this is kind of an all-rounder computer. It has all the power you need to do day-to-day tasks like heavy web browsing with hundreds of tabs open like I have every day. Enough power to not feeling the need to close any apps, and you can run about anything you want. There has honestly never been a better time to buy a Mac. For most people, this overall package is beyond enough even if they go for the base model iMac. Just keep in mind that the performance you're getting for this price would be only available if you paid about thrice or quadruple the amount you paid for this iMac. The design may be subjective, but if you like the design or don't mind how a computer looks, then this might be the perfect computer to go for. And if you don't like this design, I would recommend you go to a store if you can and check it out how it looks in person. I think you'll be impressed. And if you still aren't, then I guess you might want to buy the D brand sticker that they'll sell you for an extremely high price, and I guess that'll make your iMac look better. So yeah, that is my full review of this computer. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.